My wife's sister is trying to sabotage our marriage. Is she interested in me? When I married Sarah, I thought I was building a life with the love of my life. She was everything I wanted, caring, thoughtful, and my best friend. We had been together for a few years, and the idea of spending the rest of my life with her seemed like the easiest decision I ever made. What I didn't expect was how Sarah's sister, Julia, would become a growing problem in our relationship. And as crazy as it sounds, I began to wonder if Julia wasn't just trying to sabotage our marriage. If maybe she was interested in me. I know how it sounds. The idea seemed absurd at first, even to me. I mean, Julia and I were never particularly close. She was Sarah's younger sister, someone I'd see at family gatherings or holidays, but we never really hung out one-on-one. At first, her presence was just a normal part of life, part of the package that came with being married to Sarah. I never thought too much about it. But slowly, things started to shift. It began with little comments, compliments really, that seemed harmless at the time. Julia would tell me things like, "You're such a great husband, Sarah's so lucky to have you," or, "Wow, if I ever get married, I hope my husband's like you." At first, I took it as a joke, or just her being friendly. But after a while, the comments kept coming, and they started to feel different. Almost like there was something more behind them, something I wasn't quite picking up on yet. Then there were the times she'd go out of her way to be around me. If I was in the kitchen cooking dinner, Julia would drop by unannounced, saying she was just in the neighborhood. If Sarah wasn't home yet, Julia would find a reason to stay until she arrived. She'd ask me questions about my day, my job, even about our marriage. At first, I thought she was just being friendly, but the frequency of these visits started to raise red flags. There was one time I'll never forget. It was Sarah's birthday, and we had planned a quiet night in, just the two of us. I had bought her flowers, cooked her favorite meal, and was looking forward to spending time together. But then, right in the middle of dinner, Julia showed up, no warning, no invitation, just barged in like she always did. She had brought a gift for Sarah and acted as if crashing our evening was no big deal. But as I watched her, the way she smiled at me, the way she lingered just a little too long in my personal space, something clicked in my mind. Julia wasn't just being annoying, she was interested in me. I tried to push the thought away, convincing myself I was reading too much into it. After all, this was Sarah's sister. She wouldn't do something like that, right? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that her behavior had been escalating. Little by little, she had been inserting herself into our lives, always showing up when Sarah wasn't around, always finding ways to get close to me. Then came the day when everything changed. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Sarah had gone out shopping with some friends. I was home alone, relaxing and watching TV when Julia showed up. Again, she didn't call or text beforehand, just knocked on the door like it was the most normal thing in the world. She said she needed to borrow something from Sarah, but I knew better by then. I could sense the tension in the air the moment she walked in. As she walked through the door, I could see it in her eyes. Something different, something bold. She sat down on the couch next to me, closer than she usually did, and started making small talk. It was uncomfortable, the kind of forced conversation where you know something else is coming, but you don't know what. And then, out of nowhere, she said it. "I don't think Sarah really appreciates you." I was taken aback. I didn't know what to say. Why would she even say something like that? "She's lucky to have you," Julia continued, her eyes locking onto mine, "but sometimes I think she takes you for granted. You deserve better." That was when it hit me. This wasn't just harmless flirting or some sibling rivalry between her and Sarah. Julia was trying to undermine our marriage. She was planting seeds of doubt, making me question Sarah's love for me. And worse, she was trying to make me see her as the alternative. I stood up, needing to put some space between us. "Julia, I think you need to leave," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But she didn't move. She just sat there, looking up at me with a smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Come on," she said softly. "You've never thought about it. About how different things could be. With me." I felt sick to my stomach. This was Sarah's sister, for God's sake. How could she do this? How could she be sitting here, in my home, openly suggesting that we, what? Cheat on Sarah? Run off together? I didn't even know what she was trying to imply, but it didn't matter. I wanted no part of it. Julia, I love Sarah. I'm married to Sarah. Whatever you're thinking, it's never going to happen. That's when her smile faded. For a moment, I thought she might actually get angry. But instead, she just shrugged like it was no big deal. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked to the door. But before she left, she turned to me and said, "You'll see. One day you'll realize that Sarah's not the one for you." I slammed the door behind her, my heart racing, my mind spinning. What the hell had just happened? I felt like I was living in some twisted soap opera. I paced around the house, trying to process everything. Julia was crossing boundaries I didn't even know existed, and now I had to figure out what to do about it. The next few days were hell. Every time I saw Sarah, I felt guilty for not telling her what had happened. But how could I? How do you tell your wife that her own sister tried to hit on you? How do you explain that without blowing up her entire family? I kept it to myself for as long as I could, but eventually the stress got to me. One night, Sarah and I were having dinner, and I couldn't take it anymore. I blurted it out. Everything. I told her about the comments, the visits, and finally about the conversation Julia and I had on the couch. I expected her to be furious with me, to accuse me of encouraging it, or worse, to not believe me at all. But Sarah's reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't get mad. She didn't cry. Instead, she just looked at me, her face pale, and said, "I've been worried about this for a while." I was stunned. What did she mean by that? Apparently, Sarah had noticed Julia's behavior too. She had seen the way her sister looked at me, the way she acted around me, and it had been bothering her for months. But Sarah had chalked it up to jealousy, sibling rivalry. Nothing serious. She never thought Julia would actually try to come between us. But now, with everything out in the open, Sarah was heartbroken. Not just because of what Julia had done, but because she didn't know how to handle it. This was her sister, her flesh and blood, and now, because of Julia's selfish actions, our marriage was at risk, and Sarah was caught in the middle. Over the next few weeks, things were tense between all of us. Sarah confronted Julia, but Julia denied everything, calling me a liar, saying I had made the whole thing up. It drove a wedge between them, and now they barely speak. Family gatherings are awkward, and every time I see Julia, I can feel the tension. The damage is done, and I don't know if it can ever be repaired. As for my marriage, Sarah and I are trying to work through it. The trust we have in each other is strong, but the scars from this situation run deep. We've had to set boundaries with Julia, but the truth is, this whole ordeal has left us shaken. It's hard to move past something like this, knowing that someone so close to us tried to tear us apart. At the end of the day, I don't know what Julia's real motives were. Maybe she was jealous of Sarah, or maybe she really did have feelings for me. But one thing's for sure, her actions almost destroyed my marriage, and I'll never be able to look at her the same way again.